Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another video at the Pharmacist Academy. Woo! So the title of the video today is New York State Compounding Exam Part 3, specifically intravenous preparations. And today I'll be talking about the general approach when it comes to this part of the exam and give you some tips on how to succeed on this part. I know there's a lot of people who are scared of this part of the exam, and that's the main reason why they don't want to take the New York State compounding exam. But by the end of this video, you're going to feel more confident. I promise you. Okay, so the general approach, I divided it into 8 parts. Okay, and for each part, I'm going to dive in deeper. So let's go on. But before I start, I want to remind you that any error made in any of those 8 components that I listed is considered a fatal flaw. Okay, so that means you could get a 0 on the whole prescription. Alright, now there are certain things that you need to be aware of in order to prevent this from happening, and that is what I'm going to share with you in this video. Okay, but at the end of the day, the number one thing that you could do to prevent this is repetition. Repetition is key. All right, you got to work on your technique when it comes to preparing the IV. Okay, and you just got to keep doing the problems. All right. So the first component, calculate the appropriate doses to be added to the IV bag. Now, in order to do this, first of all, you need to know how to convert from pounds to kilograms or vice versa. All right. You must also know the BSA formula. Now, I didn't include this formula in the video, but if you Google it, you're going to see that it's a very easy formula to memorize, actually. Okay, so make sure you take a look at that. Next is the units of the doses may be presented as maybe grams, milligrams, micrograms, nanograms, milliequivalents, milliosmoles, units. So always pay attention to this. You don't want to get the question wrong because you put the wrong unit at the end, right? That's like a waste of work. Next is doses are given per day, but you must divide it if you have to, all right? You must convert it to per mini bag. All right? The question want the answer to be per mini bag. So example, if they give you that 30 milligrams per kilogram per day is the dose, but the directions say 1 bag every 8 hours. In this case, if the patient was 60 kilograms, the daily dose would be 1800 milligrams. But that would not be your answer. Your answer would be 600 milligrams per bag because the question is saying 1 bag every 8 hours. So the patient would get it 3 times per day. So when you did the calculation, the 30 milligrams per kilogram per day, you have to divide by 3 to get per bag. Please keep this in mind. Next, they may present the dose to you in a form of dosing table. Now, a dosing table is usually like a table with about 2 to 3 columns, and they include the dose that they want you to select. They include, let's say, the patient's body weight, and let's say the patient's height, for example. And depending on the height, the weight of your patient, you will select the correct dose. So as you can see here, they have the daily dose here, but there's no unit, which is okay. You're not going to see that on the exam, okay? But just know that the unit could be anything, so just keep that in mind. Then here they have the body weight in pounds for you to select the correct weight and then match it to the daily dose. Select the appropriate drug sources and diluents supplied to deliver that dose. Now, on your exam sheet, they're going to have a section that says available in pharmacy. Now, this is basically everything that's available to you when it comes to preparing the IV medication. All right, so when you do your calculations, let's say they give you drug A and you find out that you need 200 milligrams of drug A. Now you got to see what is your source, right, of drug A. How am I going to get this drug A? Maybe you go into the pharmacy and then they say that drug A comes as a 10 ml vial and a concentration of 100 milligrams per ml. So that would be your source. Okay, now drug sources may be in a vial, an ampule, or a bottle, so just keep that in mind. Drug sources may be in solution or as a powder. And as we know, if the medication comes as a powder, you must reconstitute it. Now, the diluent that you must use for the reconstitution depends on the medication itself, right? It could be sodium chloride, it could be sterile water for injection, it could be bacteriostatic water. Okay, so it really depends on the medication itself. Available drugs in the pharmacy are labeled with its concentration. So once again, concentrations are very important. Okay, learn how to read different types of concentrations. You may see it as milligrams per ml, or they may give it to you as a ratio strength. The milligrams per ml is obviously easy, right? That's like the most simplest form that you could put a concentration. What about ratio strength? In this case, we have 1 to 1,000. So the 1 means gram, so it's 1 gram per 1,000 ml. Next, we have percentages. In this case, we have 30%. So that means 30 grams per 100 ml. Percent always means 100. Make sure you analyze the concentration and the stability of the reconstituted medication. So on your exam sheet, they may give you some information regarding this. For example, they may say after you add 9.6 ml of sterile water for injection to this powdered vial, make sure you shake it, right? So you got to pay attention to these kind of things because it could influence how the medication will turn out. Some medications may require you to use a filter needle when adding the medication to the IV bag. Pay attention to this part. When we say filter the medication, we are not saying when you're drawing the medication out the vial, right? Let's say you're drawing up 6 ml into a syringe. When you're taking it out, you don't use a filter. You just use a regular needle. You take it out the vial. You take off that needle and you put on a filter needle and you put that in the IV bag. So you filter it into the IV bag, not out the vial. Okay, don't get it confused. All medications that come in an ampule must be filtered. So even if the question doesn't tell you to filter it, when you go to prepare the medication and you go to the pharmacy and you notice that, oh, the medication, let's say it was drug A. Drug A comes in an ampule, make sure you filter it, right? Filter it into the bag. Another way they may present it to you for you to determine if you need to filter it or not is they may say something like drug A is a 500 milligram vial, okay? And you must reconstitute it with 9.6 ml of sterile water for injection to make a final volume of 10 ml. Now, as the package insert says, filter must be utilized if the reconstituted vial exceeds 40 milligrams per ml. Excuse me. In this case, must filter since the concentration is 50 milligrams per ml. Okay, it's higher than that 40 milligrams per ml that they said. If the concentration, right, the concentration of the medication, right, of the medication in the vial is over 40 milligrams per ml, you must filter. Okay, very straightforward. Next, select the correct IV bag. Now, when it comes to the IV bags, you have different options. You may see sodium chloride. You may see dextrose 5%. You may see lactated ringers. You may see half normal saline. You may see anything, okay? So just keep that in mind. The volume of the bag, it might be 50 ml, 100 ml, 250 ml, or 1,000 ml. It depends. The exam may simply provide you with what type of bag to use and the volume of the bag. So the prescription can simply say 30 milligrams per kilograms per dose of drug A and 250 ml of dextrose 5%. So in that case, they gave you the bag, they gave you the volume, they made it super easy for you. Sometimes they won't give you that. And in that case, they usually provide you with a Trissol's chart, which is an IV compatibility and stability chart that you could utilize to determine which bag you should pick, whether it's sodium chloride or dextrose, and what volume it should be, whether it's like 50 ml or 100 ml or 250 ml. Okay? And this chart comes in two forms. There's chart A, which is when one drug is being added to one IV bag, and chart B, which is two drugs being added to one IV bag. So for chart A, we see 4 columns. So the first one is the diluent. Now, you could automatically eliminate some of these medications here, so don't be afraid. Just look at what's available in the pharmacy. If the pharmacy does not have dextrose 10%, you cross it out in the Tristel's chart because you don't even have it in the pharmacy. So why even bother looking at it? You cross it out. If the pharmacy doesn't have Renges solution, you cross it out. Okay, so let's assume that the pharmacy had 0.9% normal saline and dextrose 5% in water. Next, you go to the concentration. In this case, it's presented as milligrams per ml. But once again, they could switch it, right? They could make it micrograms per ml. So make sure you pay attention to that. Now you see a bunch of numbers, and this is the concentration, right? So if you see 10, based on the unit, is 10 milligrams per ml. If you see 20, based on the unit, is 20 milligrams per ml. Now let's say the concentration, let's say it says 5 milligrams per ml in the chart. Okay? Now you have to figure out your concentration. Now when I say your concentration, I'm referring to the concentration of the medication in the IV bag, not the concentration of the vial itself. Okay, please remember that. This is the concentration of the medication in the IV bag. Alright, so let's say the medication dose was 600 milligrams. You drew up 6 ml because the vial came as 100 milligrams per ml. You added this 6 ml to 250 NS. Actually, for the concentration, it's 600 milligrams divided by 250. Okay, that would put it in milligrams per ml. So let's say you get an answer of 6. Okay, now I said that, imagine that the concentration requested here was 5 milligrams per ml. If you get 6 milligrams per ml, that means you cannot use that specific bag because it exceeds that 5. And sometimes they may say up to. So let's say in this case the normal saline, they may say up to 10 milligrams per ml. So that means if the concentration of your medication in the bag is 11 milligrams per ml, you cannot use this. Alright, you cannot use this because it will not be stable. Next, they have the stability at room temperature and the stability in the refrigerator. Now the question usually will tell you which one they want, whether they want stability at room temperature or at refrigerator temperature. So pay attention to that. Now here you see, let's look at 18 hours and let's look at 24 hours. Now for 18 hours, what would make you pick 18 hours versus 24 hours? You would pick 18 hours if, let's say, you had to infuse a medication for 16 hours. Okay, so you want something that's going to be higher than the time that you have to infuse the medication for. If we look at 24 hours, let's say we had to infuse the medication for 48 hours straight. Continuous infusion for 48 hours straight. I cannot use 24 as the expiration time because the medication will expire before the infusion ends. Okay, so that will help you determine which one to pick. Another thing to consider is the hospital policy. The hospital policy always win. Okay, it always win. So let's say you chose that the bag is going to be 18 hours expiration at room temperature. If the hospital policy says that the maximum expiration time is 12 hours, you must put 12 hours as the answer. Okay, the hospital policy always wins. This is IV compatibility stability chart B for when you're adding 2 medications into one bag. Now I know there's a whole lot going on right now on your screen, but do not panic. Pharmacist Academy is here for you. Okay, so let's start with drug A. So let's assume you have 2 medications, drug A, drug B. Let's start with drug A and keep this very simple. So we select drug A. Matter of fact, let's assume drug D instead because I want to point out something for you guys. So we have drug D and drug C, for example. Okay, so for drug D, when we look here, we have the manufacturer. Okay, let's assume this was PAC and Crest. I want it to be two different manufacturers, PAC and Crest. Now, what will make you pick PAC versus Crest? Look at what's available in the pharmacy. Okay, if the medication supplied in the pharmacy is not from the PAC manufacturer, all right, then how are you going to use it? You can't. Okay, so keep that in mind. So let's say our pharmacy had Crest instead of PAC. Remember, I said this part will be Crest. Okay, so we're going to go with Crest. So then we keep moving to the right. Next, they're saying that the maximum concentration is 2 milligrams per ml. So if I put drug D in the IV bag and I get a concentration of, let's say, 4 milligrams per ml, right, I wouldn't be able to use this, okay, because the max is 2 milligrams per ml. But they wouldn't put you in a situation like that where you chose the right manufacturer but the concentration was incorrect. Okay, because you can't move up and down. You can only go sideways. So in this case, let's assume the concentration was 1.5 milligrams per ml. We could use this here, right, because the maximum is 2 milligrams. After that, you're done with the first drug. Drug D is done. Okay, we know which one to select for drug D. Let's take a look at drug C now. Drug C, you start up here. Okay, so you see the manufacturer, it must end in this box right here. They have to meet in the same box. Okay, so the manufacturer, let's say it's Sanford. There's two types of Sanford, right? But there's two different concentrations. Now, what will make you pick 5 milligrams versus 10 milligrams per ml? Let's see what the concentration of drug C is in this IV bag. If the concentration is 6 milligrams per ml, you wouldn't pick the 5 milligrams here, right? You would pick the 10 milligrams per ml. Okay? Then when you go to the next part, you're going to see normal saline. Both of them have normal saline, right? But you're already on this line right here. Okay, so you're going to go with normal saline. Okay, and if you look here, it comes in 50 ml and 100 ml. The 50 ml, the expiration time is 8 hours at refrigerator temperature. And for the 100 ml is 12 hours. All right. Now, what will make you pick one over the other? It depends, first of all, what the question asks for, right? In this case, the above refrigerator. But if the question was asking for room temperature would have been in here for you to select, you know? So it really depends on that. And it also depends on your infusion time, like I mentioned, right? If your infusion time is longer than the expiration time, then you cannot select that IV bag. Okay? I know this IV compatibility and stability chart seems a little complicated, but once I put up the videos of the IV preparation practice problems, we're going to utilize this chart with actual problems, so you're going to understand it more, I promise. I've already went through this already, but this is another way of presenting the Trissel's chart. Okay, now like I mentioned here, concentrations may be listed as up to 5 milligrams per ml. Some IV stability compatibility charts may include the volume of the bag. Some don't, right? But usually there's something in the question that would tell you how many mLs the bag should be. You may also see unstable, which they usually use an I to show like what that means, right? So if you see I, it means incompatible or unstable in this case. Selecting the correct IV bag / expiration. Concentrations may also be given in ranges, as you see right here. So 0 to 20 milligrams per ml, 21 to 50 milligrams per ml. If you find the concentration of the medication in the IV bag, and if it falls into that range, then you could obviously utilize that bag. The time designated in these stability charts reflect the shelf life of the product. If the IV product is found to be stable at 36 hours as per stability chart, but hospital policy states that all IV products are deemed to be expired in 12 hours, then the shorter expiration time of 12 hours must be placed on the label Remember, the hospital policy always wins. Patient-specific issues that must be considered. If the patient is sodium restricted, it's more appropriate if you give the patient dextrose, right? So if you have the option of choosing sodium chloride versus dextrose 5%, in this case, go for dextrose because the patient is sodium restricted. But you must keep one thing in mind. You can only use dextrose if it's stable, right? If the medication is stable in dextrose. So in this case, safety and stability always wins. Okay? So please keep that in mind. It doesn't matter if the patient is sodium restricted. If the medication is not stable in D5W, you will not give the patient D5W. You got to give that patient normal saline. If patient is fluid restricted, try to give them smaller volumes of IV. Okay? Only if the medication is stable in it, once again. If the patient is diabetic, try to go for sodium chloride if that's available. Other things to consider. If the drug is indicated to be photosensitive in the question, right? So if they tell you that, okay, drug A is photosensitive, therefore protected from light, or when you go to the pharmacy to pick up the drug, right, the vial, in order for you to go prepare this IV bag, you notice that it's in an amber vial. Therefore, that means that this medication is being protected from light. And you must also do the same once you finish making it and putting it in the IV bag. So you use a brown protective translucent bag and then you put the IV inside this bag. Please, please, please do not put your label on the brown bag. Make sure your label is always on the IV bag itself. Volume of additive drug inserted into the IV bag is negligible unless if indicated. So keep that in mind, please. Prepare the IV product in 10 minutes or less. Ooh. This is when people start shaking. You know why? Because you have somebody standing right next to you, watching you, making sure that you're doing this correctly. So this part is crucial. Okay? This is the most crucial part of the whole exam. But trust me, it's not that bad. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do. First, you must make sure you select the right items when you go to pick, the medication and the bag from the pharmacy section. You may be picking drug A, but drug C vial may be in there also. So if you don't look at it, you're going to pick the wrong medication. You may think you're going for normal saline, right? In the normal saline bin, you know what they put in there? Dextrose 5%. So please, please, if you get a fatal error because you chose the wrong bag or you chose the wrong medication, then you deserve it. All right? When you pick it up, just look at it. Read it first. Look at the expiration and everything. Next, practice your technique. Practice your technique. Your IV preparation technique is crucial for you to practice that. So let's say you're on rotations. You're on clinical rotations, so you're not really in the IV room. What you could do is ask the institution to give you like a normal saline bag, right? Maybe 50 ml. And some syringes and needles. And when you go home, you could practice at home. Just work on your technique there. You could set up a table to make it look like it's a IV hood. Okay, you could practice your technique there. If you're doing sterile compounding as a rotation, even better. You're probably making IVs all day. So ask for feedback in that case. Let somebody watch you and ask for feedback. Inspect the bag after preparation. Now, one of your job as a pharmacist is, even though you put the right dose, right? You chose the right IV bag. You put the right dose in the right IV bag, okay? You still must do this. You must inspect the bag to make sure that first there's no discoloration. And next, there's no precipitation. Okay, because some medications, even after you put it in the right bag and everything, it can precipitate for whatever reason. And still, you got to make sure that there's no particles in the IV bag because IVs must be sterile. It's going directly into the vein. Next, use a filter needles. We talked about this already. Remember, anytime you use an ampule, it requires a filter. Now, future videos will focus on the technique when it comes to preparing the IV medications. Next, calculate the correct infusion rate. I have a whole video on this. I have about 11 questions answering different types of infusion rates. So please check out that video. I'm going to put the link in the description for you guys. Check it out, okay? That video is very important. If you have trouble with infusion rates, please, I'm begging you, check it out. You will not regret it. And that will be the end of this video. If I didn't explain this concept in the easiest way for you to understand, feel free to ask me more questions. Leave a comment. Make sure you like, subscribe. And if you feel like this was helpful, share this with somebody else. Share with your classmates, okay? So that they could also learn and also succeed in whatever they're doing, okay? So thank you guys for watching this video, and just be on the lookout for the next upcoming videos, which is going to be the IV problem itself. All right, I have some very good problems which will go through all these concepts that we talked about. So until then, take care, and this is the Pharmacist Academy.